Now, it's stories making headlines elsewhere. A devastating series of tornadoes has ripped through the U.S. southern state of Alabama, killing at least 23 people in one county. The National Weather Service says at least a dozen tornadoes touched down in Alabama and Georgia on Sunday afternoon. And more storms are expected. More than 10,000 people are without electricity. Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido is planning to return to the country today, but he faces possible arrest after traveling to Latin America in defiance of a ban. Guaido has been trying to drum up regional support for his claim to the presidency. He already has the backing of several Western countries, including America. Guaido is returning home to lead new protests today and tomorrow against the government. In Algeria, thousands gathered in cities around the country for a 10th day. They're protesting President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's plans to stand for a 5th term. The 82-year-old Bouteflika suffered a stroke 6 years ago. He's rarely seen in public. Opposition parties and civic groups say he's not fit to rule. 6 other candidates have registered to run. Sara Hossain is from the UN Independent Commission of Inquiry into the 2018 Gaza protests. She was one of 3 writers of the UN report, which claims widespread abuse. She joins us on Skype from Bangladesh. Let me just quickly raise some of these abuses. Israeli soldiers shot more than 6,000 protesters, 940 children shot with live ammunition. Sara, can you tell us more about this report? And thank you for joining us. Hello, Sara Hossain, can you hear me?
The line's not good. Yeah, thanks a lot. I can't hear you terribly well, so if you could just repeat the question.
Okay, just tell us more about the findings of your report.
Yeah, the main findings of our report, which is focuses on the period between the 30th of March to the 31st of December last year, 2018, we look at the demonstrations that were held in Gaza, on one side of the fence that separates Gaza and Israel, the weekly demonstrations that started on the 30th of March for the Great March of Return. And our findings are basically that in the shootings on the demonstrators by the Israeli security forces, some 189 Palestinians were killed, of whom 183 were killed with live fire, and over 6,000 Palestinians were injured. At the same time, 4 Israeli soldiers were injured, and incendiary kites and incendiary balloons that were sent out from the Gazan side also damaged large amounts of property in southern Israel.
And you are saying that these possibly amount to war crimes, crimes against humanity. Explain that to us, please.
Yeah, well, we found that the demonstrations were largely civilian in nature, and we found that in most of the cases, the overwhelming majority of cases, the legal standards that were applicable were under human rights law and under law enforcement rules, which means that the only justification for killing in that situation would be in terms of whether a person was facing an imminent threat to their life or serious injury. We found 2 incidents, one on the 14th of May, on the day when the protests were also in relation to the U.S. Embassy opening. On that day, we found that there was some kind of armed attack from the Gazan side at a protest site and at a protest time, and that may have amounted to a direct participation in hostilities, which would mean that a different legal framework would apply, and that there may again have been some justification on that occasion for the ISF shooting to kill people.
Can I just jump in here and very quickly, because we're running out of time. I mean, you know that nothing is going to be done. There's going to be no fallout from this report. So I'm just wondering what your end game is here, what you hope to achieve from this.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I can hardly hear anything.
I'm just saying, sort of historically, from these sort of reports or findings of violence in this sort of circumstance, nothing gets done. What do you expect to be the outcome of this report?
this is just an interim report. We'll be giving the final report to the Human Rights Council on the 18th of March. But in the meantime, we have called for action from various parties. We have called for action from Israel to stop the shooting with live fire. We've also asked for action to investigate the killings and injuries that have already occurred. We've called for action from the Palestinian authorities and the de facto authorities in Gaza as well to reduce the risk to which people are being subjected and to stop the throwing of kites and incendiary balloons. And we've asked for action from the international community to try to ensure immediate protective monitoring at the site of the protest as the anniversary of the first protest comes up on the 30th of March, and as it's anticipated that there may be much greater threat to life and limb.
Okay, Sara Hossain, thank you very much for sharing your findings with us. Let's take a look now at the figures from that UN report. 940 children were shot with live ammunition, 35 were killed, 39 journalists shot and injured, 2 were killed. 81% were shot in the legs, 122 injured had one or both of their legs amputated. 20 of the amputees were children under the age of 18. Now here's one of the survivors of that attack, 16-year-old Miriam Abu Matar.
هلا أنا أول ما تصابت كنت راح أموت. بعدين كنت في حالة بتر، بعدين الحمد لله الدكاترة يعني كانت معجزة أصلاً. يعني ما بعرف يعني حكوا لي يعني كانت مستوى نجاح العملية الكبرى كانت بتاريخ 1/6 كانت راح تقرر مصيري راح تبتر راح تكون موجود بس يعني كمنظر بس هيك أو إني راح أرجع أمشي فكانت يعني محتمل العملية إنها تنجح بس 20% بس الحمد لله أنا نجحت 80%.
And let me just explain that picture to you. That was the deliberate targeting of an Al Jazeera journalist, Hod Abdelhamid, a friend of mine. So I heard from her directly what had happened, how she was deliberately targeted. She had to go to hospital. And then the next day there was Israeli sniper fire also targeting her. And she was one of several journalists that were targeted covering this event. Now, there's been mixed reaction to the UN's report, some calling it completely biased. Tonight we speak to Sean Sachs of NGO Monitor on Skype from Israel. And in our Johannesburg studio, we have Mohammed Desai of BDS South Africa. A warm welcome to both of you. Sean Sachs, what is your response to the UN report?
Well, this is just another case of the United Nations Human Rights Council convicting Israel of wrongdoing. It then appoints a commission to establish the crime, and the commission then chooses which facts suits the Human Rights Council.
So are you disputing the facts? How many people were injured, how many amputees there are because of this, the fact that at least 6,000 people were attacked, the shooting of journalists?
No, unfortunately, many of these things are an unfortunate reality of the situation on the Gaza border, but the fact that the Council itself and more importantly the Commission decided to suspend rules or manipulate international law, mix it with local law enforcement, and then come up with a conclusion that finds Israel guilty of war crimes, which is actually an issue of international law between sovereigns. By mixing all of these different legal terms up, in essence, the Commission has said that Israel should have been playing cricket on a rugby pitch, but then condemns Israel for not following the rules of cricket. It's not about mixing the legal issues, it's also about mixing facts.
Mohammed Desai, what is your response to this report and what Sean Sachs is saying?
Let's stick with this analogy of playing soccer. So Sean Sachs and his organization, NGO Monitor, which, by the way, has been discredited by Israel's Deputy Attorney General itself, saying that the organization that Sean Sachs belongs to misleads and manipulates information. But given that, NGO Monitor submitted information to this process. They bought into the process. And now, after the results of the process, now all of a sudden, the process is being slammed by an NGO monitor. You can't have your cake and eat it. If you're going to be part of the process, if you're going to make submissions, then surely you must accept what these learned commissioners that have put together this report have come out with. But also reading the report, Jane, it's harrowing, it's horrific, it's devastating to read about how an 11-year-old kid is shot in the back of his head, how a 14-year-old girl, for simply wanting to put a flag up on the fence, is shot dead. These are snipers. This is not, as Sean Sachs has tried to claim, the reality along the fence. These are deliberate, cold and cruel, calculated shots by snipers who are trained to kill.
What do you think the justification for that is? I mean, many Israelis believed, as they were told, that the Palestinians are coming to invade Israel.
I think that the Great Return March, where these killings took place, actually these protests, in them we have a lot of hope. Here we have tens of thousands of people coming out every Friday, insisting that they're not going to die on their feet, but they're not going to die on their knees, but stand on their feet. I think that the idea of freedom, the idea of liberation threatens the Israeli psyche, just as how, in many ways, apartheid South Africa was threatened by the idea of a liberated country. But in the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, in the Palestine solidarity struggle, we're not only going to free Palestinians, but Israelis as well.
Sean, I believe you want to jump in. I mean, what is your response to what was said there? And possibly there's another way. Carry on.
So he would have acknowledged that the Commission itself said that this report, that most of the protesters were violent in nature. This included explosives, although the Commission acknowledges this. The Commission didn't necessarily admit that it was explosives being used by Palestinians. It included, as the Commissioner said, armed individuals. So in a situation where there are armed individuals mixing with protesters, violence that includes explosives, why are children being brought to this? Mr. Desai, your organization claims to be a human rights organization, yet you're silent about the fact that children are being brought into a combat zone. Why are they being brought to the border, Mr. Desai? Why is your organization, a human rights organization, fine with the fact that children, Palestinian children, are being brought to a protest knowingly in harm's way? That is contravening major human rights law, and you are defending that. In fact, the de facto authorities, as the Commissioner said, are responsible for bringing children into harm's way. That is a crime, Mr. Desai. That is a violation of human rights that you are not willing to go into.
I don't think anyone expected their children to be shot, though.
Just two quick things. I think that firstly, Hector Peterson, Solomon Mhlangu, these are children of our struggle that were killed, that were shot. We don't blame the fact that they stood up for their rights. We blame the apartheid regime for having killed our children. And likewise in the Israeli-Palestinian issue, children are wanting to be children. And yes, they do protest just as how we had successful June 16 protests in South Africa. Likewise, the youth of Palestine are coming out to claim their humanity, to claim their existence. So it's quite a simple reason as to why youth were coming out into these protests. And secondly, Sachs claims that the report suggests that people were violent. I'm not sure whether we're reading the same report. The UN report says that the people that came out from the Palestinian side were civilians and that the protests were a non-violent form of expression.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Both sides of a devastating story. All your sports up next, and then we look at possible political strong-arming at the SABC.